So, according to you and your research, what is the kind of impact that the print industry has had on the Indian diaspora or the Indian subcontinent as people in their daily thoughts? Has it impacted in
So, for
that way?
example, if you see the early newspapers, the newspaper was an expensive product to buy. Okay, so if it would cost you half a rupee. That sounds minimal now, if you could just multiply it by 1,000, it would be for 500. The equivalent would be paying 500 rupees for a newspaper
Princely.
today. Okay, so what would happen is one newspaper would be bought, and there are records which suggest that it was read by 50 people. Okay, so the minute the newspapers started, they were really picked up by a large section of the Indian population. For example, one of the early newspapers in Marathi was called the Mumbai Darpan. Okay, it was started in 1832, and after 6 months, it actually published a note on the newspaper which said, "We will no longer publish any letters praising ourselves." Because they got such huge feedback from the reading public, which was totally delighted by the fact that a very decent, elegant and well thought out Marathi newspaper was being published, and they were getting so much fan mail that they had to actually put out a note which said that no more of these letters to the editor will be published if it praises us. So that is the kind of impact which those papers had. But having said that, again, I think that the impact was at the very elite level. These are all people. The literacy levels were very low, and very few people could afford newspapers. So let us say, assume that at the top levels, it made an impact immediately, and a lot of people were writing letters to the editors. A lot of people were subscribing, and there were more readers than buyers. By a factor of 50 or 100. And papers would be read not just on the day they were published, but they would be read literally weeks and months afterwards also. And they would be preserved properly. They would be bound into volumes. So they were all literally, very, very exclusive property, and they would be well treasured. So they had an impact, but the mass impact took a long time. I think that comes much later.
Yeah. So, I don't know if it's really relevant, but the question comes to my mind, so I ask. India was called Sone ki Chidiya in some era, if at all, if we don't know our history as much. So, in your research from the 1500s that you have been doing, have you seen any kind of relevance with regards to the print industry in terms of, did we have that kind of impact, or we were always a poor country right from those eras when the Britishers came in or the Portuguese came in earlier?
This is well beyond my field of expertise in terms of talking about the history of India's economy. So I can't really answer that question. But
the reason I asked is, you mentioned that it was the print was only for the elite,
right,
and they were not percolated into the masses. So I was just trying to get a slight understanding, was how were we in that time frame, were we like only the 1% in the top, or
see the disparity of income which we see now in India? I think it existed even 500 years ago, and maybe even more so. I'm not really
fair enough.
But I think the disparity of income and the spread of wealth, the disparity which you see now, which is, I think, astounding, I think persisted even 500 years ago. So I think that there is no getting away from that. And I think the disparity of wealth was a universal phenomenon, but the vast differences which you see in India now also existed even.
It was always there. Just wanted to understand more from the printing
very much
eyes as well, because print took a lot of volumes across, and to, as you mentioned, 50 people, 100 people used to read that.
Absolutely.
So,
and then there were also people reading too. If you didn't know how to read, then you were read to. You could have a sabha under the tree, and in a village or in a community, and one person would read. For example, a young boy of, let's say, 10 or 12 would be reading it out because he goes to school, he can read it.
Correct.
And the other community members cannot.
Correct.
So they would be listening and he would read it out. So that would also happen.
Correct.
So there was one reader and many listeners.
Yeah, these were the nuances that I was
absolutely. Yeah, so that always happened.
Yes.
And there are reports which actually say that this is how we are doing it.
Interesting.